Okay, let's make a start. Please remember to have your microphone muted and be aware that we are recording this session starting now. So, get myself organized here. So I'm Nick Jacobs. I'm the Regional Innovations Lead for London for the Elliot Foundation and Lead Practitioner for Hindon Primary School. And I'm here to talk to you all about the learning framework for hold on, pardon me, I have a cat desperate to get in the room. So our agenda today is, first of all, why a framework, then looking at what the research tells us, then looking at the framework itself, and then what next. So why a framework? So when thinking about this session last week, I actually was looking at my kitchen and I was thinking about this kitchen needs some work, and I was looking at kitchen design and thinking about that, and I came across this quote. And this quote got me thinking, because it said all kitchens share the same purpose and elements, similar to a framework. And I started to think, what would it be like to design a kitchen without a framework? I wondered this. And then I wondered this. And then even if you manage to get those pieces to fit together, would you be able to communicate how it's working with others? And also this, perhaps the most crucial. And it made me realize that a framework can be key as a starting point, and you can innovate and be creative within that framework, but it's a crucial starting point for having a consistent language of things. So I was thinking then, well, what does a framework for learning need to have? And the list was very long, but we managed to actually boil it down to two key things. First of all, and this one is largely to help the teacher know not how to teach, but what the steps are that are going to happen in that lesson. And by having that consistent, it makes it far easier to plan ahead. But more importantly, to reduce the metacognitive overload placed on learners. If a child is coming to a lesson and each lesson looks wildly different, they're going to need to do a lot of work just to simply unpick what's happening on the screen. And then they'll be able to start understanding the learning or thinking about what the question is. By having a consistent structure, a consistent framework, the child knows what's coming next, knows what's expected of them, and can focus only on the learning. So thinking about tech, and now, and next, and later, of course, we are currently in school closures and we are hopefully opening up soon. So the framework has been crucial recently for this. But next, how might it be used? It could be for homework. It could be to extend the lesson so that lessons don't simply end when the book is closed in the classroom and can continue when the child goes home to either choose to do more work or simply show their parents what they're doing. And later, with hybrid teaching, and my colleague Ellen will be showing more about pedagogy and how hybrid teaching might work. So I want to get you guys involved now. I'm going to give you a quick question. And the question is, what is the most important part of a learning sequence? Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to write the answer in the chat, but not yet, because I'd like you to try a waterfall task. And this means we're all going to write our answer in the chat, but not press enter until I say. And then we're all going to press enter at the same time, and it should create a lovely waterfall effect of comments coming down. So have a quick 10 seconds. What is the most important part of a learning sequence? Write it in the chat now, but don't press enter yet. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. Get that finger ready over the enter button. Okay, 3, 2, 1, enter. Whoa, this has gone faster than I thought. Intention, I like it, Emily. Clear explanation, I agree. Hi, Sean. Assessing the needs of the children first, crucial point, thank you. Hi, Steph. Remembering, building on previous skills. Yep. Higher thinking skills, crucial point. We'll be coming to that later on when we focus on our metacognition. Clear aim. I like this focus here on clarity, which is a crucial part, especially online teaching. Okay, thanks for that. That was insightful and faster than I thought it would be, but let's move on. So with that in mind, before we can clarify what is the most important part, and actually I was wondering, would someone think I was going to say all, and that wasn't my plan, but to actually understand what we need to have in our learning sequence, let's look at the research. So what does the research tell us? Starting here, in October, we received this document from the DFE, all about good practice, and they focused on the EEF. And I was really pleased to read this because they were pointing out that the same things that work in teaching in the classroom work online. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, but just reform things slightly. And they pointed out these points. None of this is new to us. It may be a new way of phrasing it, but it's all the things which we know and do every day when we have children in our class. So I was really glad to read that. Then later on in January, we received this from OFSTED. And this is a fantastic document. I really recommend you reading this if you haven't done it already. What's working well? And they said, again, I was really pleased to read this, and that focus there on cognitive science, and it's this metacognition which we're going to be focusing on today. So speaking of that, let's go to the EEF and a document which they brought out back in April, all about home learning. And they brought it out in response to the lockdown, and they gave us a planning framework, and they started it off by saying this. And it's that point there, metacognitive strategies can be taught and are even more crucial when you're not with the children. So I'm going to pop this in the chat for you to have open on your screen and to read later on. But to show you the 5 parts, they're on the screen right now. Activate, explain, practice, reflect, review. Again, nothing new. You probably already do activate in a warm-up or a do now or a mental starter. They're just naming the steps, explaining what it is, and why having it in the lesson. Now, I'll be coming back to these later on, so I won't have you read them just yet. One other document which we looked at for the research was this one, Early Career Framework, which outlines 8 standards. This, for me, is by far the best set of standards I've ever seen for teachers. If any teacher did even half of these things every day, they would be outstanding. And we use this to help have a reference point for what good teaching is and to ensure that anything we did online was always driving towards these things. For example, in standard 2, they pointed out on the right-hand side there, learn how to avoid overloading working memory by taking into account prior knowledge, as mentioned in our waterfall task. And the second point there, breaking complex material into smaller steps. So we've taken where relevant parts of this and put it into our framework. And speaking of that, let's move on to the framework itself. So these are the sections that we have included in our framework. You'll notice activate, learn, practice, reflect, review, and a few more in there as well. And we're going to talk through all of them. Now, at the end of this session, I'll send you the actual template for the framework, which is a blank document, but you can use it. I'll also be sending you a guidance document. And on that document, there'll be a video going through everything that I'm saying now in a brief 5 minutes and giving you some more support, tips and tricks, and examples of use. But let's focus in. This is what it looks like. And I want to focus you on this blue box there. And notice how I'm going up and down on the slides, and it's moving across on the sections. Now, it would be easy to assume that the sections, as shown here, have to happen in order. That's not true. And to illustrate this, I'm going to show you 2 examples. This example here, is, from memory, a year 5 maths lesson. And if you just watch the blue sections, at the top, you'll see check-in, welcome, activate, learn, checkpoint, back to a learn, one more checkpoint, practice, reflect, review. And a different example. This is a year 1 computing lesson. And in this lesson, the teacher has done the same start, activate, learn, over to a task, then to a checkpoint, a bit more learning, practice, reflect, review. Just showing you the sequence is up to you, and you can duplicate if you need to. Now, going back to the planning framework, I actually left off one sentence from what they said, and it was this one. And it's a key point. It's easy to assume that it all has to happen in one lesson, as it did there. It can do, and it can be strong, but it can also be over a learning sequence. For example, you might in one lesson have lots of new content, so not want to have them doing much reflecting or reviewing, just having lots of learn, practice, checkpoint, and so on. And then later on in the sequence, you might want to have more weight on the later sections. Now, let's start to look through each section one by one, starting off with the check-in. Let's think about what we do in the classroom normally. First of all, we lay it out with tables. We have pencil pots, we have labels on the trays, coat pegs, everything's nice and clean, and good classrooms have stimuli on the walls, but not too much. Then the children come in and we notice how they come in. We watch for that child who has a few behavior issues, and we notice if they're having a bad day. We touch base with them, we give them a chance to vent, we put a hand on the shoulder if we notice, we grab a tissue for the child who's about to sneeze. All these things we can't do online. So that checking becomes crucial, that point of reference for the child to know I'm walking into a lesson. So one thing that we can do is this. Now, this is a chance for the child just to share how they're feeling, to vent it out and leave it at the door. The children can either drag those pictures over or type in there a different one, and then also say, this is because. And then a different section is this part, settling the children down before the lesson, letting them know that, hey, you're about to enter into a lesson, let's get ourselves ready. Now, in practice, we found that not all children like this. The younger children love it, the older children less so. And also that children, if they were, say, getting 3 lessons per day, didn't want to have this every single lesson. So our teachers in our school began to innovate and include their own check-in and change it. And actually, a check-in could simply be, are you ready, yes or no? Just anything which tells the child you're about to enter into a lesson, forget what you were doing in the garden just now, calm yourself down, let's do this. Moving on to the welcome. Now, going back to the What's Working Well document, there's a quote here that I want to show you. So thinking about the sequence, the welcome starts off like this. The lesson number or date and the objective, but then showing a sequence of lessons. Now, what goes inside those boxes can be really, really brief, but it's just showing the child, you did this yesterday, you're doing this now, and we're going to do this tomorrow. And on the guidance document, there'll be a box section, which will have 6 boxes or 3 boxes, so you can choose filling into whatever subject you are doing. Then it moves on to criteria and vocabulary. You'll notice also there are green sections over here. Just under the welcome, it says, what will we be learning today? We want to keep these blue sections consistent and not change these names, but the green sections can be changed. And if you want to have a different phrase in there, you are free to adapt that. Okay, moving on to activate. And I'll let you have a quick look at what the EEF define as activate. You'll notice at the bottom of this page are 3 boxes. On the guidance document, which we'll send you, is this slide. And you'll be able to click on and see exactly all these examples of what activate could look like. But let's show you a few now. So this is an example from a year 1 lesson. The teacher was about to move into more detail about a non-fiction book, and they wanted to touch base and have the children check, do I actually know the difference between fiction and non-fiction? And their task here was to simply drag the green tick onto the 2 parts that were non-fiction. Then there's This is a lesson which is going to be about writing a persuasive letter, and the teacher wanted the children to have a quick reference on, do I actually know what is more persuasive and less persuasive? A nice checking part there. Now, a point to make here is that these sorts of tasks don't have to be marked. You might leave them out because it's for the child to have that warm up. But later on in the lesson, if you notice in the main task, the child got that all wrong, you might come back to this and be like, okay, what did they get wrong? Clearly there's something not quite right, and this will probably tell me. One more example. This lesson was a teacher going over a reading session, and they were just going back to, do you know the skills which we covered yesterday about finding answers? Now, the teacher likely went over those skills, but rather than just simply tell the children and have the children listen passively, she invited them to think first. Okay, moving on to the learn section. Now, there's some text here that has been taken from the Early Careers Framework. I won't let you read it for now, but it is on there for you to read later. And of course, there are examples at the bottom of the screen. But let's focus on this first. So online, clarity of explanations is crucial, because in person, you can see the children when they have that vague stare and they're just looking at you like, I have no idea what you're saying. In person, you can notice that and adapt. You can't do that online. So clarity becomes crucial. Now, I wanted just to show you something here from the Chartered College of Teaching. It's a lengthy quote, but I think it's worthwhile reading. Now, in case this has struck you as interesting, I'm just going to pop in the chat a video which you can watch later. It's just 5 minutes and it's fantastic. But this is known as dual coding. And this is an image to show what dual coding might mean. And dual coding helps us to tweak what we're doing. And some tips for how you might tweak your learn section, your modeling, is to avoid talking over text. And you'll notice today I've avoided any points where there's been text on the screen talking to you at the same time. I've let you read it on your own, or I've been talking over pictures. One more tip is just to take a moment before you do your explanation. Even just 10 seconds is useful. If you want to, map out a key question you want to say, or give yourself 3 key words you want to cover in that model. Doing that just for a moment even ensures that your modeling will be clean, clear, and crisp. And if you make a mistake, don't feel like you have to re-record it. Children need to see mistakes, but just taking that moment to think before you're going to explain really helps to make sure that your modeling is as clear as it can be. And last tip is to keep things clear and simple on the screen. It's fun to do things like Bitmojis or pictures, but don't do too much. Okay, here's some examples of the learn section. In this lesson, the teacher wonderfully had the idea of having a tripod with their phone looking down at a piece of paper, because this let them use a physical tool, which was in this case coins, and they were narrating over what they're doing, talking it through, letting children hear that thought process. Here's one more example. This is an example of the teacher having a scaffold on Google Slides, recording a video using Screencastify, and simply using I think it's called the annotation tool in that software, which lets them draw over the video while talking. The key point here is the children are seeing the teacher talking on the same template they're about to be doing their work on. It's giving them that scaffold and then taking it away over time, which we'll come back to soon. And then this is Jamboard, again, more of a freehand task here. The teacher just working through a model, like on the whiteboard, and narrating their thought process. So some things to point out. As mentioned before in the research, it's crucial to avoid overloading. So break things down. And this is a year 2 teacher here who has separated 2 sections of the work. Could easily have been all on the same page, but wanted to keep it clean and clear, focus the child on one section first, break it down, and then have them move on. It's better to have 2 slides here than try and squeeze it into one. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture. Oops, wrong button. There we go. Again, as mentioned before, when you're modeling, do it on the same scaffold the children are about to use. And then as the lesson or learning sequence continues, take away that scaffold, because they've had that support. They should be able to do it on their own. And over here, a top tip is to use pause points. Pausing while doing an input is a great tool because it lets the child engage in the video, rather than the child sitting there and listening passively. Telling the child to pause the video and have a think about and then carry on gets them thinking. So this is the same quote that I showed you before, and I want to focus on the second part of it. We can't easily correct misunderstandings or misconceptions. So that's why we've included a checkpoint. Now, the checkpoint, again, we've drawn some sections from the Early Careers Framework, which you can read later on. But at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there are 2 examples here of a checkpoint. The first one is a self-led check, and it looks like this. So if I was to drag this blue box, the answer is there, and the child is then asked, if correct, keep going, if incorrect, go back to the video on slide 6. Now, the child, of course, could cheat, but as long as you explain to the child why it's important we have this checkpoint, and you keep it consistent, they'll have a buy-in. They'll know why we're doing it. They won't want to cheat. They'll want to test themselves and then go back. Here's one more example. In this case, again, these green boxes are draggable, but also there are 2 boxes for them to say, okay, click here if you were right, click here if you were wrong. And those could be linked using the link function in Google Slides to either a different slide or to a video that you've already shown them, or even to a YouTube video which has more detail. So that's how to do a self-led check. If you wanted to have more of an encouragement for the child to really do go back, then you can use what's called a branching Google form. Let's have a look at it. So this is the edit version. And if I scroll down, it starts off with your name, your class, and then this section, which is checking your understanding. Now, this question here has 3 possible answers. The banana goes to section 2, as does the orange answer, but the grape goes to section 3. And that's because the grape is the correct answer. And section 3 is more questions, extending their questioning, seeing if they can answer some more challenging tasks. But section 2 tells them, okay, that wasn't quite right, not to worry, do this step. And in this case, it was click on the video, which is the same video as shown in the lesson. But it could be an extending video going into more detail, could be a picture, could be a YouTube link. It asks the child to tick a box to say, yes, I have gone back, and then they are allowed to continue on to the next section. If you want some tips on how to do this, we'll be doing a video tutorial very, very soon. Okay, moving on to practice. Again, practice, we have taken some examples from the Early Careers Framework, which you can read through later, but I'll show you some examples for now. In this case, this is a year 1 lesson, simply dragging in boxes, and dragging around boxes is a really effective task. Again, similar thing here, ordering the story. And over here, a maths lesson, getting the child to write into the boxes. Now you'll notice in all these examples, green has been used. Now that's because we want the children to quickly know where they are expected to put their answers. So the child looks at this slide, and if it's consistent, they know any green box is where I do my writing. Also, the person giving feedback knows to look for that green box and can quickly find where the child's work is. As you can see here as well, there's a green outline on the child task. And over here, it's a dragging task, more detailed, key stage 2. And of course, we can have writing tasks as well. And this is a science lesson. Last of all, we can have a quiz. And using the functionality in Google Forms, we can make this quiz self-marking so they can give feedback directly to the child. Okay, moving on to the reflect section now. This is what the EEF framework says about reflect. And thinking back to what I said before about including the child in the thought process and understanding of why they're doing something, this is perhaps the most important part, because reflex stages can easily be neglected by the child. It can be this, oh, what am I doing here? What's the point of this? I'll just do it quickly and move on. It's crucial to include the child in the thinking around why reflect. So reflect could be simply referring back to the criteria at the very, very start of the lesson and having smiley faces, which you can drag in there to say, yeah, I feel good about this, or I don't feel good. And again, talking to the children about, look, be honest. If you don't know, be brave and say so, because that's a crucial part of the learning. Again, it could be simply a what went well, or a EBI, even better if. It could be a checklist. So after doing some writing, it could be a chance for the child to reflect on, have I done all these things? And if not, why not? It could be simply asking them a key question. Did you enjoy this? Why? And what's going to happen next? Pausing the lesson near the end and just having the child take a step back and think, what did I do today? Did it go well? Did it not go well? Why not? And this avoids the child repeating any negative behaviors, negative patterns, which are not beneficial for their learning. Then moving on to the review section. As mentioned before, review doesn't need to happen in the same lesson. It can do, but often review is more about thinking of what you've learned before and if you can still keep it in your head. Research shows that when you're just about to forget something, that's the best time to ask or to be asked, do you know? Because then you struggle, and it's that struggle which deepens your learning. And if you forget, fine, but if you don't struggle, if it's asked to you too soon, there's no effort there. It's still in your short-term memory. It's that transition, isn't it, from short-term to long-term. So review has been said from the EEF as this. And here's some examples. This is a quiz, which is referring back to not that lesson, but the previous lesson. This is a phonics lesson, which again is checking, has the child remembered the phonics taught, not in that lesson, but actually 2 lessons before. Over here, the teacher taught verbs in a previous section and has given a really quick, do you still know this? And over here, Mrs. Sheldon went back to the start of the lesson, but she was going back to the very, very start to see, have they retained that knowledge from the very beginning of this lesson, and giving the child an open question. So with all of this in mind, the question is, what next? Now, I'd love to get you guys involved again and ask you, now you've seen all these sections, which of these sections strikes you as the most challenging to plan? We're going to do a waterfall again. So 10 seconds thinking time, write your answer in the chat, and then wait for me to say go. Okay, a few more seconds. I'm going to predict that maybe the checkpoint is the most challenging. Let's see. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Checkpoint, checkpoint, checkpoint. Yep. It is a really challenging part. Good point from there, from Ellen. It needs a model, doesn't it? Just as the learning process. If you model that thought process, okay, here's the checkpoint. What am I thinking and why am I doing this? The child is going to be more, what's the word? More bought in to the whole process and know why they're doing it. Yeah. NQT, so all of it? No, not at all. Yeah. So checkpoint, and the checkpoint is a section which we found our teachers did need that time. And it isn't something which you'll be expected to have watched me talk through and go away and do straight away. It's something which you just need to experiment with and try out. And over time, as mentioned, if the child gets that consistency and knows it's coming up in their learning sequence, it's actually the same thing you do in class. It's that mini plenary. It's that whiteboards up. It's the same thing, it's just doing it online is more challenging, but I've given you 2 tools that we can explore. One button. So thinking back to tech and what's next. Right now, with the announcement on Monday, we have schools opening up. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with all that we know about remote learning? And actually, I was asked this question recently. I was asked, you know, what do you want to take forward? What has been your highlight? And for me, it was the focus on pedagogy. You'll notice today there has been a real drilling down into some of the thought process behind how children learn. And sure, I had done that before, but not in this detail. And I'm really glad to have had this chance to reflect in this much detail how children learn and actually have it laid out on a template as well. And it's that thought process that I now want to bring into my lessons and think, what did I learn from how children think and how they learn, and how can I bring it into to classroom teaching? So when I shared the 2 points of what a remote learning framework needs to do, I left off one of them, and it was this one. Because if there's a consistent framework that we're all working from, it offers a launch pad for innovation. And that's what we've noticed in my school, where all teachers year 1 to 6 have been doing this framework since January. And I challenged them. I said to them, hey, don't just do what I'm showing you, innovate and show me other ways. And in the checkpoint where you had the drag a box to uncover, that wasn't my idea, that was theirs. There's been a few more, there's been many. Most of these examples, none of these are mine. They're all the teachers in my school innovating and trying things out. But what's also exciting is other schools have been using this framework. And the more that you use this consistent structure, even if it looks different, but if we can keep a consistency of the steps and the background as to why we're doing it, it gives us a launch pad to share and innovate. And that's really exciting for me. And thinking back to the kitchen analogy, and once you have your kitchen designed, and pardon me for this really poor example here, but once it's there and in place and you have it designed and set up, that's when you get to go nuts and try out new things and see what works and see what doesn't, and be brave and be prepared to fail and let the children see that failure and just call it as part of the learning process. So that's the end now. And I just want to leave you with the thought that if anything has struck you today as interesting, or you want to know more, or you have an idea to share, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And we have 28 schools in this network. The more of us thinking towards this, the better it's going to be for our children. That brings us to a close. We're going to drop into the chat an evaluation form, which I'd really appreciate if you can do for us now. But also, I'd like to open up a chance for any questions if there are any as well. So feel free to unmute and shout out a question, or to pop it into the chat now. And I'll take no questions, as I've just been so clear that there's not possibly anything that you have to ask. Ellen, feel free to pop the, oh, there it is now. Thanks, Ellen. Hi, Brett, good to see you.
You know, I'm very shy. I wouldn't want to do any talking, would I now?
Any questions, Brett?
No, it's a really, well, I've just written it in the chat. It's a gorgeous and well thought out frame and a really good stepping stone for any sort of lesson that you would want to do. And like you said, it will be a chance for you to tweak it and duplicate slides and things. So yeah, it's really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah, and for me, my thought now is, can we continue this with classroom teaching, and what changes will I make to the framework? So there's one framework for the classroom that looks similar and one framework for online learning as well. Yeah, and Ellen's asked that question just there, you know, how can we take what we've learned in this framework and bring it into the classroom? Our children happen to be familiar now with this framework, so it would be beneficial if some sections were kept the same. But what I like about doing a framework, and what's been really, really strong for us, is that year 1 to year 6 have used the same template. So it's meant that we've been able to share and innovate across teams. So having any sort of consistency, and I know some schools already do this, has been a key point. But what I'm interested in is, now that the children are really used to going online, can we have lessons which start in the classroom, pause midpoint, and have the children go back home and do a bit more, even if it's just a reflect or review, and then come back the next day and carry on that learning, not making it that the lesson has to be a cycle within the classroom, that the lesson can stretch over to the home life and back again. It's a new area of learning. I would want to tell the children that the lessons were coming up, but we'll see how we get on. Is that okay? Sure. Of course, yeah. Oh, thanks, Ellen. I did promise, didn't I? I would post those two documents. That is the guidance, and let me drop in the actual template itself. That is a forced copy link, so when you choose it, it will make you copy. And I think I forgot also to drop in the early careers framework. Sorry, Woon.
I was just going to say, I was just picking up what Brett said there, and the any video added in one lesson feeding into a library for future reference. In deploying this framework in your school, have you had any feedback from parents? Because I'm thinking they're also another stakeholder that'll be supported by this framework.
Absolutely. They have been gushing about being able to see how the teacher explains things, especially the lower down as well, because that's where the parents tend to have more of a part, don't they? They might sit with their child, and where the parents were unsure about exactly how the teachers are explaining something, the teachers have said being able to see the input from the teacher has helped them then to help their child and not confuse them by saying, well, this is how I do math. So, oh, okay, that's your way. I can watch it and follow it, and now I can help you out. So yeah, absolutely. Parents have loved being able to see their teachers talk to their children. Okay, seems that brings us to a close. So thanks everyone for joining. Please do fill out that form, and I'll see you all soon.